God communicates to us in many different ways, through dreams, through healings, through intuitions, through people, through places, through nature, and all around us.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide, and we see God, we see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, drawing us in, inviting us into a relationship through divine intervention, encounters with angels, big and little God incidents. Today, the nudges. God's nudges. Here on Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. It's not a competition. Sometimes I listen to these things too, and it's like, wow. The magnitude of some of these encounters, and it kind of seems like a competition. It's like, I saw my angel. Oh, yeah? Well, my angel spoke to me. Oh, yeah? Well, mine fixed me breakfast. Oh, yeah? Eggs and toast. No sausage? Or you'll hear these episodes where, how do you top somebody being able to drive their car through another car that God would not allow there to be a crash, damage, injury of any kind? 3 times now so far. We have real people telling real stories of somebody driving their car through somebody else's. It's like, can you top that? Well, yeah, I cleaned out his glove box for him. Oh, yeah, well, I combed the driver's hair. Oh, it's like, how do you top this stuff? You don't. It's not I'm holier than you because I see an angel and you don't. That's not the way this works. And the fact is, some people are getting nudges all the time and just oblivious, or think it's coincidence. Take the word coincidence and just throw it away. Let's start with Father Dan Schlegel. He's a local priest. He's the secretary and vicar for clergy and religious in the Cleveland, Ohio diocese. What that means, basically, he's the pastor to the pastors. He's the link from the bishop's office to the local parishes for the religious, the clergy, the priests, and all. And I was interviewing Father Dan for our parish bulletin because he's going to be our Lenten mission speaker. Let me put it this way. What's your burning bush? How does God speak to you? How do you feel His nudge, His inspiration? Talk about how God speaks to you.
Yeah, I call them God instances, not coincidences. I can tell you that there have been some extraordinary things, but part of it is the ability to make connection. And when I say make connection, to be able to see the hand of God at work in things, because I'm putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 4. I'm beginning to see how God is at work. So I can tell you that there have been just numerous God incidences where I begin to say, oh my gosh, that's really God at work. People laugh at me, and sometimes I remember one lady, I had done her husband's funeral, and she began with this unusual song from the movie The Mission, and it was called Gabriel's Oboe. And she played it for her husband's funeral, and it played twice because it's such a short and brief instrumental piece, and I've never heard it done at a funeral, but she decided to have it done for her husband's funeral. It was beautiful and haunting. And a week or so afterward, the family had asked me to type out the homily rather than just my notes. So I was typing it out, and I had Pandora on. And wouldn't you know, as I'm typing out the homily for the funeral, Gabriel's Oboe came on. And I was like, I had chills. And so I called my friend and I said to her, you're never going to believe what just happened. And I'm writing funeral homily out, and Gabriel's Oboe came on Pandora. Can you believe it? God used Pandora. And she said to me, don't you have anything better to do? I was crushed. I said, what do you mean God is speaking to me here?
Yeah. Are you afraid to homilize about that kind of stuff, or are you
Never.
Okay?
No.
Okay. Cool.
No, I've spoken about my dad.
Yeah, the dream. I remember being at Mass when you talked about the dream thing.
God communicates to us in many different ways, through dreams, through healings, through intuitions, through people, through places, through nature, and all around us. And if people only had a sense of how beloved they were by God, then healing would flow, because we would be overwhelmed with that whole sense of that we are God's beloved, that we are truly loved by God.
You had it in the form of a dream. Was that 4 years ago when you had the dream, or near then? What was going on in your life then, Father?
So there's a lot of anxiety, about my mom after my dad's death and how she was going to survive. She was my dad did everything for her, so it was like, well, what are we going to do now? And so I was filled with a great deal of anxiety, and I went to bed one night praying Lord, give me the words I need to speak. And it didn't happen in terms of knowing what to say, but it did happen in terms of this tremendous peace I felt. The image that I thought about was a child in the womb, that the child doesn't have any fears, doesn't have any worries, doesn't have any concerns, is being fed 24 hours a day, can sleep or do whatever it wants. I felt that kind of peace, that I was just floating, and I was in God's abundant and loving care. I didn't have a worry in the world. So I woke up, and it was one of those things like, this is just too good to be true. I feel so good. I feel so confident. I feel so unafraid. And I remember waking up out of that and wondering what's going on here. And whether it was my Father's Spirit or the Spirit of God just embracing me and holding me, that's kind of what I felt like. So to me, the image is the child in the womb.
I love when you do that, Father. I think that makes it real. And I think it makes it okay for others.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes
Absolutely.
it okay.
There's so many stories like that. I mean, I could write a book just on those God incidences that people have gone through.
I want you to give me your most, and I'm telling you, on my podcast, people say the most amazing things. So this is, I want to hear your story, give me your best, if you want to call it that.
So I just tell you that one of the things that, as you know, I became vicar for clergy and religious just about a year ago. And the previous fall, I had been asked to consider the position, and I was happy as a lark where I was. And I had a good gig, it was a good situation for me. I had been there 15 years. I think that I had done a decent enough job there, and the parish was alive and blossoming. And then I told Bishop Nelson Perez, the person asking me, that I would consider and pray about it. I went off to Switzerland, had a beautiful time with our parish choir, but told no one, including my mom, including anyone from Holy Angels, about what I was asked to consider or possibly do. So I came back from Switzerland, and one of the volunteers thought it was humorous that I was gone along with many of the staff members for 10 days and kind of leaving the parish afloat. So he was at Home Depot, and he thought he'd play a practical joke, and he picked up a for rent sign. And on that for rent sign, he said, it says for rent, and when it says call, he put call Bishop Nelson Perez, and he posted it on the outside of my office door. I got home from Switzerland. I looked at the sign on my door, and I said, okay, God, you win. I was asking for a sign. I didn't know he was going to give me a sign. So, I mean, I almost fell over because it was just such an obvious sign about what I was supposed to do. And I went from a decision that was as clear as mud to a decision that was crystal clear because of that sign. And what were the chances for that happening?
But that tipped it for you. That made it real.
Absolutely. When you know that what you are doing is then called by God, that it has been named by God, and so clearly, I think people are happy to know that this is part of God's plan. That makes the job not a job, but a vocation, a calling from God.
Thank you, Father Dan Schlegel. Favorite takeaway out of there is when he talked about 2 + 2 is 4. That God, I love this. He does this with me too. He throws something at me. He throws something at Father Dan and says, figure it out. And you go, what? And you have to figure it out. It drags you into the conversation. Wait, what was that about? What was that? 2 + 2. And then you add, is that what you mean? Is that what you mean? And then this conversation goes on until you get clarification of exactly what God is trying to tell you. But he involves you. He includes you in the conversation. How cool is that? But first, you got to do a little figuring out sometimes. Happens all the time. I told you, I get music. Sometimes why that song? Then spiritualize the lyrics, and then you add this to that and that to the. Oh, okay. Is that what he wants? It just drags you right into this conversation. You're going, my gosh, I'm having a conversation with God. And you saw Father Dan go through that same thing. 2 + 2. What should I do with this? Bam, there's your answer. Now you have clarity. We're going back to talk to Tracy Icovetti. She was in episode 38. Tracy was some of the, you can call them the nudges, still big, but some of the nudges as she's praying to God because she's going through some huge losses in her life. Here's Tracy Icovetti.
My mom called me, my my stepfather, who I just adored, was diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And my mother was not in good shape. And I'm like, oh man, Lord, what are we going to do? So there I was. Now I went to the prayer room. I used to be part of the prayer team, but I wanted prayer for my stepdad. And I was sitting and I was waiting my turn. It was a long line to be prayed for. And while I was waiting, I was in a state of prayer and just talking to the Lord. And I heard, this time loud, I'm doing something in this. And I thought, okay, well, I know God, and God performs miracles and heals people. So I'm like, cool, everybody's going to know that you're real because he's going to get healed from the stage 4 cancer is what I was thinking. And I almost shudder telling the story because it's hard, but it wasn't the way it turned out. So this was, for me, the beginning of losing quite a bit of family. So Papa Ron did not survive the chemo, the cancer, and he passed away. And 2 months after that, just another family member, my husband's mother, and then my husband's sister, and then my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and then she passed away. And then, it was a season of loss, incredible loss. And in 3.5 years, we lost 12 family members. Every other month we were at a funeral, and we were looking at each other at one point going, what is going on here? Well, I was very close to my parents, and to lose one after the next was really hard. Every time one was passed away, 2 months later, the next one was diagnosed with cancer. I walked my mom through hers, and when she passed away, a couple months later, my last parent, my father, was diagnosed, and it was hard. And then a text comes through and says that my aunt just had a heart attack and passed away. And I shut my phone and I threw it across the tent, and I grabbed my Bible and I walked out, and I went and I sat in the parking lot because I didn't want the kids to see me. And I just started crying. I'm like, Lord, I know you said you're doing something in this, and I don't know what it is. There was a pain that I was getting in my heart, and this cold rush is all I can explain. I felt like empty in my core, and this cold wind was just blowing up my body. I felt like a gutted fish, and all I could get was these waves of cold air coming up my body. I knew it was related to the death. I didn't know what it meant, and my heart was starting to hurt. And it had been going on for about 2 weeks. Well, at this point, it was really bad, and I would have to actually push on my chest to make this pain go away. And I was sitting on this parking curb when I found out this chemo's not working. Now I'm going to lose my last parent and all these other people. And I couldn't anymore. And I said, Lord, I know you said you're doing something, but I don't get it. I don't get it, and I don't know what it is, and I'm sick of losing people. This hurts. I can't do this anymore. And I don't know how dense I am, but I don't get what you're doing. I'm sick of losing people. And I just couldn't stop saying, I'm sick of losing people. It hurts. I'm sick of losing people. I'm sick of losing people. And the last time I said, I'm sick of losing people, I heard, so am I. And it took me right back to the first time I came to the Lord, and I said, I just want to know you. I was literally in my mind back in that church where I said, I just want to know you, God. I felt like I knew him. I felt like how war veterans fight together. I knew God's heart more than I could have ever known God's heart, because I had experienced so much loss in my mind. 11 people, my favorite people, my parents, and I could have never known the pain of losing people had I not lost so many people. It hurt my heart so much. I literally had pain in my heart that I would have to push on it. And when I said I'm sick of losing people, this hurts. I'm sick of losing people. I'm sick of losing people. To hear him say, so am I. I realized God's heart for losing people. And what must his heart feel like? How many people has he lost? How many people walked away from him because they didn't get the job they wanted, the girl they wanted, things didn't go the way they wanted, so that now they walk away from God? Like, how many people has he lost? And I said in that moment, no kidding. Like, I knew him, and I knew his heart for people. That's why I get mad when we misrepresent him and chase people away from him. So I said, anything I can do to bring people back to you and get rid of that pain in your heart while there's still breath in their lungs, whether that's being a hospice nurse. And I thought, why did I say that? I have no desire to be a nurse. Or teaching the Bible, because I taught at the time. And then it broke this grief bubble that I was stuck in for a while from loss, because now I understood what he was doing in this. He was letting me know how much he hates losing people and how much we're everything to him. And it was weird because I didn't even know why I said whether that's being a hospice nurse, because I had no plans on being a nurse. But right after that, people started saying, you know, Trey, I've been watching you with your parents. You'd make a really good nurse. And I'm like, well, that's funny. And then I kept hearing it again. Like, my sister said it, friends said it, nurses said, you know, everywhere I turned around for a little bit there, I was hearing, you'd make a really good nurse. And I thought, is that what you're also doing, Lord? And so I said, well, you know, I'm 47 at this point. I don't really have time for wrong turns. I don't want any wild goose chases, but if you want me to be a nurse, I'll be a nurse. I loved our hospice nurses, and I'm not afraid of death, and I actually became good at helping people die, you know. And the experiences I had when my parents passed were beautiful. But then I told my husband, and he said, well, if you think that's what you should do. And I just prayed about it. And against like really long wait lists, I kept getting into classes. And now I'm a nurse, and I'm 55. I've been a nurse for a couple of years.
At 47.
I started back to school at 47. I am the nerd I never was in high school.
Wow. You decided at 47 to be a nurse.
Yeah.
That's pretty, talk about following God, following the Holy Spirit. Gee.
He's crazy. He just takes us places.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm realizing too, he really doesn't care about age. We care about age. He does not care.
Yeah, my friends were like, Tracy, shouldn't you be thinking about retirement? I'm like, no, if this is what God's doing, let's go. It's just an adventure.
Well, me too. I'm supposed to be retired. Nope. I think I'm going to get busier than ever.
Nice. It's fun. Well, you're in a fun field. Your stories that you just get to keep hearing about, how encouraging.
I agree. I totally agree with you. It is fun. It's really fun.
Awesome.
Just telling stories. That's all we're doing is just telling stories, real stories. That's the beauty. To me, that's the beauty of evangelization. You don't have to sit down and try to convince anybody of anything. You just tell them stories.
You just tell your story.
And if they have a mind, they have a mind. And their mind can go, this is real or not real. And then based on that, do I want to go? Because not everybody wants to go down this road. They may believe it, but they may go, I don't want that. I want to live in this world. So be it. But at least we're giving them the information with real stories. That's the beauty. I don't have to try to convince anybody of anything.
No, and the Holy Spirit is so good that when you tell the truth to someone, they may not like it, but it's going to stick like a rock in their shoe. And they can avoid it, you know, but I mean, the truth sticks, and it's good for them, you know.
And I agree with you. It is all about, when he says, I'm tired, I'm sick of people leaving too, I get music. I get music, and I started getting music many, many years ago, and I would then spiritualize the lyrics, and then, like, what is he really saying with this song? So when was this? I don't know if it was this year or last year. This one song played like every day forever. It just plays like the worst earworm in the world. But the song is Phil Collins' Against All Odds.
Oh, okay.
So here's a guy who's lost a girl, and he's saying, "Turn around, see me cry. Turn around, see where you used to be. Turn around, and against all odds, I'm going to wait for you. I know you're not coming back, but I'm going to wait for you." Spiritualize the lyrics. That's God singing to His church that are
totally
that are
yes.
emptying out. Turn around, see where you used to be. Turn around, see me cry. Turn around. I know you're not coming back, but I'm still going to wait for you. But some of us do come back. I left for a long time until I was awakened. And against all odds, He waits for us. He hurts and He waits. It is gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
That's a really good song for that.
Perfect. Thanks, Tracy. Big takeaway for me on that one was, here she is, she's praying, she's grieving, she's losing a lot of people, she's losing physical lives, and then God says, again, as an answer to her, He takes her into a different place, which is, and I'm grieving maybe, perhaps, eternal lives. He's grieving over those souls that have turned away from Him. Which is more important, that loss of the physical life or the loss of that eternal soul? And God, Jesus, there with her saying, yeah, look at this though, look at this. So here we are again. I talk about how we pray for something and it's like, and Jesus just ignores me. And no, He's trying to give us maybe a little different perspective, because we're supposed to be thinking like God to the best of our ability, always be thinking like God, getting on the same page with Him. And when we do that, we do have more of these experiences. And we are given more information that's to be figured out, as Father Dan said, that 2+2 part, you figured out in the ongoing conversation, right? And if you have not listened to episode 38, please do so. You can do it right now if you want to, just to give you some insight on all the experiences Tracy has gone through. Huge events, huge encounters, including being allowed to go back to the passion of Christ from the agony in the garden through the crucifixion. She was allowed to see and to feel what was going on through Jesus. I have never, ever, in hearing anyone talk about the passion, felt the way I did after hearing Tracy talk about the passion of Christ and what He did, and 2 particular sentences that she kept repeating over and over again that were going through Jesus. And it's like, if you haven't heard that, episode 38. But before you go back to that, one more great nudge story is coming up after I give you a little nudge about Patreon. If you can help us out financially on a monthly basis. My feeling is that the reason we do all of this is that most people don't know about the ongoing conversations. Most people don't know what God was doing 2,000 years ago. He's still doing today in a variety of ways. Most people don't. Most people are just kind of unaware, and this is just kind of slowly seeping out there that these conversations are going on, that they're open to all of us. We believe that these messages will keep going out, that the podcast will keep expanding and affecting more people. And we do that with your help by either going to this episode 42 of touchedbyheaven.net, or go to Patreon directly, patreon.com, look for Trapper Jack, and help us out. Whatever amount you want to make it on a monthly basis is the perfect amount. Thank you. From Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. Now then, our third nudge story involves Tony Alexinas. Now, Tony, back in 1969, had a very bad year. He was in high school and he lost his dad. His father was shot and killed. Tony will tell you that story, but then the gift that God gave to Tony in that grief. Here's Tony.
My father was a milkman for a dairy back in home in Dayton, Ohio, and he was being followed by a guy. The guy robbed him and shot him, and my father was killed. I was 17 years old, senior in high school, and it was a time when I was really getting to know my father more. As being at that age, playing some sports, which my father used to do, and getting more and more to know him as a person, instead of just being my dad. So, yeah, it was a rough time. It was a real rough time. My goal then was to, finish high school. When it came time to graduation, I was named after my father. And I told the principal that when they passed out the diplomas, I wanted him to say my name and add junior, because I'm junior. And And he said he would make sure he did that. So at the graduation ceremony, my aunt and uncle, my mom and my brother came. It's time for me to go receive my diploma. They called my name, and he did call Junior. I walked up and grabbed my diploma and looked towards where they were sitting, and I saw my father. Not them, not anybody else, just my dad. So you start thinking, well, did I actually see that? Was it my mind playing a trick on me because I wanted so bad to prove to him that I could do it? But I don't know. I just, like you, I think God was there to say it was okay.
Did you look back? I mean, how many times did you look up there after that?
Just the once.
Okay.
I looked back after I got my diploma and sat down up on the risers where we were and looked out, and there was my dad, and I dropped my head for a second and looked back up again, and everybody else was there.
And Dad was gone.
Dad was gone.
And everyone else was back to
Sure.
Wow. It's not like you were looking at two different places then.
No. I looked exactly where I knew my family was, and he was there, they weren't. And a couple seconds later, they were there and he wasn't.
What a gift.
Well, yeah, it was. It put a smile on my face. It eased my heart, eased my mind, and I think it helped me grow up a lot.
Yeah. What a gift. Talk to your dad now?
Every day.
What do you say?
I tell him how much I miss him. He was a good man. He was a rough man in some respects, but he was a loving man.
That generation, because your dad and my dad are probably about the same age. We both graduated high school the same year and all that.
Yes.
So we're in that same generation where dads were kind of gruff exterior. Mine was German. So there was kind of that outside exterior, but you found out later the guy was a pile of mush inside.
Oh, Dad was great with kids, great. Like I said, he had a perfect example. His milk route, he had over 300 and some customers, if I remember right. And the day that he was killed, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. 3 o'clock that afternoon, when we were receiving family members and stuff, we had a knock on the door, and it was people we'd never seen before. A husband and wife and their little daughter, who was, I think, at that time, she was probably about 7 or 8. My dad used to pass out ice to the kids in the street during the summer. They would come up to his truck, and he'd give them ice, and he always carried gum in his pocket, and he would give them sticks of gum. She went around the block and collected $300 to give to us. So that shows you what he did and the people that he touched.
Yeah.
So, it's, I think of that. Talk to him about my kids and hope he's proud of me.
Oh, I know he is, Tony. I know he is.
A beautiful gift from God for Tony. A nudge, if you will. Your father loves you. I love you. We're with you. And what more do we need to know than that? These nudges. And he's with us, and he's in us. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Father Dan, Tracy, and Tony, for being a part of this episode today. Thank you for supporting us through Patreon, patreon.com. Thank you for sharing these episodes with others. And I need your stories. This doesn't go without your stories. So get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. All right, see you next time on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.